All right, let's convene the meeting. Welcome, everyone. This is the second meeting of the Greenfield Charter Chapter 7 and 7.8 Review Ad Hoc Committee, meeting here on Zoom. Call this meeting to order. The chair's statement: this meeting is being recorded by this Charter Committee, Ad Hoc Committee. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. In accordance with Mass General Laws 30A, Section 20, small section G, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair, and all persons shall, at the request of the chair, be silent. No person shall disrupt the proceedings of a meeting of a public body. If after a clear warning from the chair, a person continues to disrupt the proceedings, the chair may order the person to withdraw from the meeting. This is not a public hearing. I'm glad. I hope more people come and watch, but it's a watching meeting for everyone but the members of the committee. Okay, so going through the agenda. Minutes to the last meeting were sent to us. Can I hear a motion to approve the minutes in a second? And then if people have things to say about it, we'll hear from people at that time.
So
Yeah, second.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions or concerns or anything needed to be changed in the minutes?
yeah, David, minor comment, but at the beginning of the minutes, I don't have them up on the screen, but at the beginning of the minutes, it said that the voters voted on referendums about a year and a half ago. It should actually be almost a year ago, because it was November 2nd to November 29th. So it's not a year and a half. Not a big deal, but it probably should be corrected to just say the voters voted on this 12 months ago.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I think we can make that a friendly amendment. We don't need to have a vote on it. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Any other comments by anyone? Okay, with it amended, how do all that approve the minutes say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Good start. Okay, there are no public hearings, as I said. All right, so wow, a lot of information, 47 pages of stuff. Don't know exactly where to begin. Obviously, Al and I both sent out information, so maybe give Danny and Catherine a chance to say something first and move from there. Everybody's going to get a chance to speak. We have 2 hours for this meeting, so let's make it a good one. So do you, Danny, or do you, Catherine, have anything to add to share with the group?
I was thinking about the information, like comparing other communities, and I just want to make sure that we are careful that we have to look at. I feel like we have to look at a lot of different situations, more than just make sure that we're looking at these based on more than just population, and use kind of like a multiple criteria in terms of both percentages, numbers, time frame, so that we can kind of come up with a common, consensus on what makes sense for Greenfield. That's just kind of my overarching first thought. And I think that's what we're trying to do here, but I just want to make sure, I know that we do comparison communities for a lot of different things when we're doing city work. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to go, depending on the topic, sometimes it makes sense to go by population comparisons, and sometimes it makes sense to go by type of government, and sometimes it makes sense to go in other ways. So I just wanted to note that.
Do you have any suggestions of criteria?
Not yet. I mean, cities, when people have a form of government that's town meeting, things like that, I think we can look at what other communities are doing, but we have to be careful, because it's different when you're petitioning, a town that has a select board and town meeting versus, a legislative body like city council. I think we just want to make sure that we note that the communities are different.
Okay,
This is the starting place.
thanks. Anything else? Catherine, anything?
I have a lot of thoughts mulling over, but I don't have like an initial thing to present. And so I'm yeah, my mind is in this very much, but I'm not sure that I have an initial proposal or question to lead with.
Okay. Everybody here read all the materials. Is that fair to say? So we're all talking from the same stuff. Okay. Well, I'll then turn to you, Al, if you wish to make a presentation on the information that you sent. I have a question for you. I have a guidance question for you. If at some point you could let us know what in general you believe is the procedure that should be followed, that would be great. Just so I see all the literature, but I'd love to hear you say what exactly you'd like to see be the procedure that we follow.
Yes, thank you. That's a very pertinent question.
Okay.
First, I want to make a comment on what Danny and Catherine just said. I wanted to make sure that people were aware that the issue of looking at comparative communities came up during the charter review process and during the campaign on the 8 referendum ballot question. This was something that was brought up, and I just for the record, and just to sort of mention some other communities, because there were other communities that were looked at by people like myself, and I want to mention a few of them very quickly, because I agree with Danny that it's not a simple thing to just say, well, we should be like them.
Yeah.
But let me just mention that, because I know that some of you might, if you hadn't seen these other towns, you might think that there were no other towns that were relevant to our discussion. But what I did several years ago in preparing for comments to the Charter Review Committee while it was meeting, while David was chairing it, as I did bring up some other communities. Let me just mention a few. The town of Winthrop. I was looking for communities that were similar in size. The city of Winthrop, 18,000 people, require 3% of the total of voters to get a petition. The town of Southbridge, 16,820 voters. This is probably, I don't know what census this was. It's probably a couple of years ago, but you get the idea. 5% of registered voters. The city of Long Meadow, 3% of voters. Town of 15,791 people. The town of Montague, again, this is a town meeting town, but 3% of registered voters, 30 per precinct. Interesting. Population smaller than ours, about half the size of ours, 8,200. City of Amherst, I think this information may be a little dated now, but 5% of registered voters. That's a town of 20,000 people. And then finally, Amesbury, a town of 17,000 people, 5% of total voters required for a referendum. So I just mentioned these because I found when I was looking some of the same ones that David was talking about, places like Westfield and so forth. But I also found these communities that were all 5% or less. And then there were a few places that had an actual number. So let me, having said that, let me just quickly move on to some of the thinking I've been doing recently, because I think my feeling over time has evolved about what to do about this. But number one is that I don't want to ever forget that about 13 months ago, last November, that voters essentially said by a 53% 47 margin that they would not like to accept the criteria of 7% of total voters as the limit, as the requirement for signatures. So 7% was rejected. The ordinance, as everybody knows, currently for the referendum then remained at 10% of voters voting versus and 2.5% floor. So in practical reality, the number of signatures can be 2.5% of total voters, because you may not get you may not get as many as the floor has to be the 2.5% in terms of the signatures. So, but I wanted to read you a quick quote from the Greenfield Reporter editorial that took place in October 29th, right before the election, for question one, and it said that they liked the idea of having voters voting being the measure rather than the voters total voters, because they said it. We believe voters have the right to challenge decisions by the city council. It shouldn't be too easy or too hard. We feel the number should be linked to the number of people who actually show up to vote in city elections, those who are engaged and interested in what happens to their city. Well, that's certainly what I felt when I voted in November, but I've been thinking about the some of the following points, and these points are, if you want to follow on, I don't know whether Danny, are you showing things on the screen or?
I can.
All right. I have a document that I sent out to people. I got a little bit of drubbing for sending it late, but frankly, I thought it was important to do this even if
Today's email.
Even if it was late. No, what? Well, it was dated the 7th. It was dated January 7th, and it begins with the phrase, "An engaged electorate is a good thing." And there's a few points there that I wanted to highlight tonight, because I think, as I think about this, it's more important to me to sort of, as David's question,
This is what you sent on the 7th?
Yeah. It had the part I want to look at begins with the phrase, "An engaged electorate is a good thing, and the process of using citizen tools should encourage that engagement, not discourage it." If you can't find it, it's not a big deal, because I'm just going to.
Hold on.
Well, let me go ahead, Danny, while you're
start reading it and I'll look for it.
Yeah, if you don't find it, don't worry about it. Everybody did receive it, but anyway, there was let me highlight the following points. What I suggested was that initiating a ballot question should be based on a number that is stated plainly in the text and does not require citizens to research the current, quote, voters voting, unquote, or total registered voting. I started to realize, why do we do that to people? Why don't we just say what we want to use as the number and not force me or you or whoever is bringing a question to call up the clerk's office and say, how many voters do we have today? What's the total number of voters voting from the last election? Because we all know that none of us know that data unless we keep a lot of clip files. But so I was thinking about, and I'm just throwing this number out for consideration, not for some sort of approval, but just to make a point, that if we have right now in the citizens referendum 326, I was going to suggest 400. It was suggested to me that we use 450. I tell you, I didn't like the method, but the idea behind it was 9 precincts times 50 signatures, which I think is the requirement for someone running for councilor. Is it 50
per precinct?
Per precinct, yeah. So
100 per hour.
So one of the things I thought was, let's not confuse people by forcing them to go back to some source to find out how many, what are these numbers? What am I actually looking at here? And then I also suggested, I went back and looked at the mayor's language about electing a mayor, and the mayor says that to become a mayor in Greenfield, you have to have not less, to get on the ballot, you have not less than 100 signatures, provided that not more than 25 come from any one precinct. So I thought maybe a possible compromise was to use similar language to say, to get a citizens initiative 77 on the ballot, quote, not less than 400 signatures, provided, however, that at least 25 signatures from every precinct shall be counted towards the minimum number of required signatures. Because what I was objecting to the person who said to me, how about a very simple, elegant solution, 9 precincts times 50? And I said, well, look, some precincts, like if you think about the marijuana thing that happened at Country Club Road, that precinct was on fire. Those people, they gathered they actually, I think, finally got to 400. It wasn't easy, but Al Collins, the organizer of that event, told me he went crazy trying to get 400 because he explained it to everybody. He didn't want anybody to sign without getting the an introduction to the issue. But he said, boy, you should tell people, and he will tell you himself when you have a hearing, 400 signatures was a lot for him to get. But people in precinct 9 or precinct 5 might not have cared as much about that issue. But the point is that if I'm trying to get something on the ballot, give me a number to shoot at. Give me a certain number, if you want, minimums per precinct. So I have to have a network of precinct people who are going to go out and get those. But don't make them be, getting you up to the total amount. Instead of 50, I wanted 25. So that's my suggestion. And I like the idea of having there be a minimum number of signatures by precinct, but not to make it so onerous that you had to go to a precinct that couldn't care less about anything, because we have that happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And then I also was suggesting in this document that the number of signatures chosen should be stable and predictable and not changing every biennial election. It should be re-examined during the next decennial review. Now, what that means is that for a number of years, I would know, and people would get used to the fact that you have to gather 400 or 500, whatever it's going to be. But these other figures that we've had for many, many years. The number of signatures a precinct councilor has to get, the number of signatures an at-large has to get. And as you may know, I'm for a totally at-large council. But the number of signatures a mayor has to get, we've had those for many years, haven't changed them. The number of voters has gone up in those years. But I think it was fair to have a decennial review to make an adjustment every 10 years if we felt that number needed to be changed. And I also suggested that the review, at the decennial point, the review should be led by a review committee comprised of a majority of non-legislative citizens. I want to just make it clear that I am the only one on this council who has never been a current or past councilor. And I bring that up because I do believe that councilors sometimes feel defensive about citizens bringing in initiatives. They're called, after all, in the ordinance, and I never would have chosen this word, but it uses the word protest, that a referendum is a protest of a vote. And I really find that to be indicative of an attitude that somehow the citizens are protesting the council when they want to see a vote change. And I don't really think that's the point. Yeah. It's maybe they're upset with an issue, but I don't think they're protesting councilors per se. And there's also a quote that some of you know from the 2001 recorder, where they had a woman from the head of the National Institute on Initiatives and Referendums who said, generally speaking, councilors don't like referendums and initiatives, citizens do. I don't think that's entirely fair or accurate either. But so anyway, that the other point that I raised was that, and I'm just about done. Related to this is that the timetable for collecting signatures needs to be, I'm suggesting 40 days instead of 30. And that citizens should be able, this next point is really critical. And honestly, I didn't think of this until very recently, but it had been bothering me for a while, but I couldn't articulate it. And it's listed as number 6 on my memo, but it says citizens should be able to bring a referendum. This is the only change I think is needed in 7.8 and 7.7. But citizens should be able to bring a referendum or an initiative forward. It actually refers better to a referendum on a legislative vote, whether it was a yes vote or a no vote on an issue. Section 7.8A of the charter should allow voters to seek a ballot question when the legislative body, quote, has voted to approve or disapprove of any measure. And I want to explain that one because I think it's so important. And I'll give you a recent example, a current example. I'm not happy with the vote that the city council took in December to reject a proposal to rezone the French King to allow industrial zoning. If the city council voted to disapprove something, I believe that citizens should be able to bring a referendum, and I believe I could easily get the signatures needed for that, that citizens should be able to bring a referendum regardless of whether the city council has voted for or against something. And I'm just using an issue that pleases me, but I could well imagine something else being rejected that I liked, and I'm glad it was rejected, that other citizens would say, no, we want to be able to have a referendum. So that's a very simple fundamental thing that I think needs to change in section 7-8A. And last points, the signature gathering process should not be complicated and redundant. And that's the language that I said about supplemental signature gathering. I just don't like it. I don't care how many towns we find that have it. I would prefer not to put voters through a second process that I consider to be redundant and not particularly additive to the process because the council has already rejected. And finally, and many of you may agree with this, but failure of a legislative body to take a vote on a ballot question, which has been in front of them for 60 days, shall be considered a rejection and allow it to be placed on the ballot without further action. I just think, look, if the council takes 2 months and doesn't do anything, and I brought a petition to them, if they're not going to do it in 60 days, why are we messing around with more process at that point? They know what they want to do. If they wanted to vote in favor of it, they would have done something. So I say if they do nothing, just allow it to go to the ballot, because that also will spur them to do something like say, oh, we're rejecting it. We're not ignoring you, we're rejecting it. So this would make it tantamount to a rejection. So that's it. Those are the main points that I made in that memo, and I hope they can stimulate some thinking. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Al. Catherine.
So I have a question for everyone. I supported actually having the higher percentage so I'm sharing some of my thoughts here. I supported having the higher percentage for 7-8 because seeing how much effort had been put into several things that went on the ballot ultimately, I saw the effort that council had put into deliberating on that people had put into organizing around those issues, and believed that that effort should not be so easily circumventable. And simultaneously, I'm holding the question. I like what Al just shared about having 450 voters. It makes sense to me to have 25 per precinct. I'm simultaneously, even though I held that opinion, I'm simultaneously holding the question of why would we make it challenging for voters to bring forward an issue that city council hadn't spent that much time deliberating about? Why it seems as though I am holding the question, why wouldn't we do that? And posing that to my fellow members, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because that makes complete sense to me, and I'm not seeing reason not to. I do think I'll add that I'm continuing to mull over all of this. I see benefit in having an initial amount of signatures needed to not completely circumvent the council process, like to initially bring it to council to have it be deliberated on there. But why make that a hard number? Like, why not even have that be something like 100 signatures or 50 signatures? Why not have that be very easy, so that we could have those discussions in a public forum and then have another? I hear you saying, Al, that would be onerous to have the 2 stages. I hear you saying that. But yeah, I'm just not seeing any rationale in having the initiative process be that challenging for voters, and 5% of, for example, 5% of registered voters is already a very high number. It takes a lot of effort. I don't see why we would make the initiative process challenging, and there may be reasons to that. And I'm curious to hear folks' thoughts.
Isaac. Thank you, Catherine.
So I agree that the initial threshold for getting something before the council shouldn't be terribly high, right? That should be, and even to require them to ultimately take a vote on something. I do think that there's no harm in a bifurcated process if that happens. I think there's real value in counselors who are entrusted with knowing issues and studying issues and getting good advice, right? Getting a lot of information to formulate a response to what is presented. I think there's real value that comes with that. And I think even though some people might want a particular result, I think when the council takes some sort of action that might be different than what was originally proposed, that might be satisfactory to most people, right? And so I think it makes sense that, you know, the people who are most interested or most adamant about something are most likely to want exactly what they want, and any deviation is likely to be more troublesome to them than it is the general public. So that's why I like that two-phase process. I really don't like the idea of, if they don't take action within 60 days or within 2 or 3 months, that it immediately can go. I've seen many issues come before the council that took us a long time to grapple with. Sure, I agree, things have been sent to committee to be killed. The rules of the council currently, and as I know them, don't actually allow for something to be sent to committee just to die. And any counselor can bring something back to the full council at any time. But there's a lot of work that really does take place. Often counselors will go to a meeting, they'll discuss, they'll get information, they'll ask for more information. And that information has to be gathered and presented back to them. And that sometimes creates more questions. And they hear from different viewpoints. Different people come to different meetings on different days, and it changes their point of view. While the people who are presenting something likely already have a point of view from the beginning of that process, the counselors who are being presented to might not know anything about this issue because it's being presented to them for the first time, at least to some of them. Otherwise, they might have brought it forward themselves, right? If it was something that they were concerned with. So you've got to give the council the learning curve to sort of figure out an issue and to try to craft the best resolution for it. So, you know, if you put a 6-month window on something like that, maybe I could live with that, but I wouldn't, you know, certainly 2 months is much too short. I actually think 6 months is probably too short, honestly. But there is value. I also agree that referendums should go immediately. That could be a one-phase process. I don't think that has to be a two-phase process. I think that could be a one-phase process. Although there is some interest in having the council have an opportunity to vote again, because if they change their mind, you save yourself a referendum.
Thank you, Isaac. Danny?
Yeah. So thank you, Al, for going over the materials that you sent again verbally, because one of the things that I was thinking about was I'm interested in the flat number possibility thing, and the, you know, having a certain number per precinct. 400. So interestingly, I think what do we have? 11,000 registered voters. So 5%.
It's something like 13,000.
13,500.
Okay.
Anyway, 13,511.
I mean, we can sort out the number thing, but I am really interested in in that path. I do think that I agree with you that having it written down in a way that normal people can understand, how do I get this thing done, should be a goal for sure. I do like that. I think that what we have to think about in terms of the time frame for gathering those signatures has to also make sense. I don't know the other communities that we're using as an example. Some of them had very short, for the smaller numbers, had very short time frames. Nowhere near, I think, what we're talking about here. So those kinds of things go hand in hand. I don't really know where I'm landing on that yet, but I don't think, you know, it would, if you're going to make people go to precincts, and it is the other thing that we should point out is in Greenfield particularly, it's challenging to get certain numbers of signatures from certain precincts because they're so spread out. You know, it's real easy to go around 5, 6, and 7 and get 25 signatures. Their doors, you know, I can see my neighbor's house right now. So, but if you live out in 1 or 9, like it's going to be harder. So I think that we have to take that into account if we're talking about a certain number per precinct. I really like that idea. I don't know yet how I feel about the exact number 450. It feels a little low instinctually to me, and I don't know why. So that is, and then as far as council action, yeah, I don't know that there aren't that many examples recently. I don't for sure of people of councils, you know, burying something and not acting on it. But that doesn't, you know, we can't operate that way. We have to operate in the theoretical too, so that it's something that could happen. So I do think that it should go directly to ballot after some time frame. But I do think that time frame needs to be longer, as Isaac pointed out. It can take a while for things to weave their way through and to get information. And counselors are sometimes at the mercy of, you know, like people like me, like people who work in the city who have to gather that information and get figures. So I actually don't think 6 months sounds, I think 6 months does kind of sound long. I feel like it could be somewhere in the middle. If there's no action whatsoever in 3 months, 90 days, something like that, that feels okay to me. That's my initial thought there. But then the other thing is the reason, I think I said something about this last time we met, but I was talking to a few friends about this in anticipation of this meeting who aren't like involved in politics or involved in things. And I had one friend, we were really chatting about it. And she said something like, it shouldn't be so easy that people can just like whip these things off. And while we maybe don't have that problem in Greenfield, we're seeing that happening around different parts of the country where you're basically legislating by petition. And I'm not saying that's where we would go if we're not careful, but that's happening in California. That's happening in other towns. It's we just saw it at the national level, like now one House member can call, the question. I forget exactly what happened, but it's like the numbers are just so low. So we have to keep in mind how that works. And it's not like there isn't, we're still a smallish town. People know their counselors personally. If somebody in Catherine's district precinct wants something to be discussed and brought up, there's also that opportunity to go to your counselor and have them put it forward. And so there's lots of ways to engage. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean this is an important way. This is as well. But I do think I'm really interested in this sort of flat number thing, because I like how elegant it feels for the citizens, but I do want to be really careful about what that number is.
Okay. My turn. I call on myself. I don't even know where to begin. I guess since there are people here watching, I just want you to know that the initiative and referendum rules are not constitutional rules. They are statutory rules. The Constitution allows people to petition, but it does not require the legislature to do anything. And it certainly does not allow for questions that happen in our local legislature to go to the ballot. So keeping that in mind, I looked in order as a person who is charged with whether I came from the council or I was one of those people that Al would hope came in from the community, which is how I was when the charter first started. We did want to look around and see how the law was in other communities or how it started. And so, I think that's the right way to write a charter. So we went to the state law. I sent you copies of it. You can't get an initiative under state law if your charter is silent. You can't get an initiative petition without 15% to 8% of your registered voters signing up. So Greenfield's already better than that in the first instance. In the second instance, the way the charter was designed, the way this charter is designed, and every single charter I looked at that was a similar city to us, you actually get, all you have to do is get 100 people to sign a petition, which is that number that Al was throwing around. And you have a right to a public hearing before the city council. So let's say I'm a group of people and I want to legislate a noise ordinance. A couple of years ago, a noise ordinance came before the council, was rejected. Let's say I personally think that a noise ordinance is a good thing. Council's not interested in doing it. So I get 100 people, I go to the city council and I have a public hearing. I could bring as many people as I want, and they all talk to the council, and they all talk to the television, hopefully, and they tell everybody what it's all about. Let's say the council still sits on its hands and it doesn't want to do anything. Okay. So you've already established some voter stimulation. You've already put something out to the community that 100 people have already thought is important. You just had a public hearing on it. People are starting to hear about it. Now you go out and you get a larger bunch of people, because now you're into a formality where as you proceed into the system, there are consequences for failure of the city council to act. So you get your, 5%, whatever the number is. And so that means that a lot more people are interested. You're actually activating voters. Now this isn't like the referendum petition where you're stuck with a 30-day time period. You just go around, you talk to your friends, you think this noise ordinance is a good thing, you've already brought it up at a thing, you go around, this one goes to that people. Before you know it, you got 650 signatures, and you bring it before the city council. Now they have to look at it, and they have to make a decision within 60 days. Okay? So here's where I think we agree. Now, what's the reason for the supplemental petition? The reason, ironically, and it didn't dawn on me until I was going through these materials. The reason for the supplemental is because it's actually like a referendum. You really are being asked. So the first group is the group that says, we really want to have this happen. But if the legislature rejects it, then you're going out and you're asking for the other 2.5% additional people, because they're actually acting like a referendum against the decision of the council. So ironically, the 2.5% referendum number that is the supplemental piece is the same 2.5% number that's in 7-8 that is being stated is the way that people would like our community to stay. Not that I agree with that. So I think that what we have in our system could be tweaked. The dates could be tweaked. Excellent suggestions. Days shouldn't start running until things are given to people. The council should be forced to look at it. The only reason I put in that it's approved if the council doesn't act is because I didn't want the council to ignore it. And what was I going to say? So that's the reason for the 2.5%. So now you get the referendum people saying, I want this thing on the ballot, and it goes on the ballot. So you have now activated another 2.5% of the voters. They're activated. When you put something on the ballot, you're ultimately going to have to activate the voters anyway, because you're going to go out and you're going to say, vote yes or vote no. This way, you're activating voters ahead of time. There is no prejudice to anyone in the initiative process to have to go out and get more people to sign up. I can't imagine what the prejudice is. What it is it's being labeled as a deterrent. But I see it as the opposite. I see it as a building of democratic strength. I mean, if you're really into something and you spread the word and more people are into it, by the time it gets to the ballot, there's something going on there. And then the ballot can take but if you're going to have a community where only 325 people can walk into the city council and say, you better decide this or else I'm taking it to the ballot, which is really what you're saying, because there really is no, why would if you don't do it, then we're going to the ballot, because we have, with 325 signatures, we have you kind of, where we want you. And then it goes to the ballot. So now at that point, how does that work? The people who are into the question probably have a professional or somebody that can go out and start marketing it and pushing it. But the rest of the people in the community are just hanging around. They're not really paying that much attention to it because only 325 people are into it. It comes before the council. Next thing you know, it's on the ballot. Next thing you know, we're like, whoa, there's a big ballot question. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't understand how that is democracy. I mean, yes, if you're stymied, if you go through the system and you start building and building and building, you go to the council and you say, I got 650 people, I got however many people 5% is, you're still not listening to me? All right, I'm gonna go out and get another 2.5%. And you know what? We're going to put it on the ballot. And at that point, almost 1,000 people think this is a good idea. Now we got some momentum. This is a lot of people who are interested in making change, not 325 people who are hanging around. They want a noise ordinance. If they don't get it, they're going to put it on the ballot. I didn't find the ballot process of the last election to be an educational process to the community one bit. I felt it was, you're wrong, and you're wrong. I didn't feel any educational spirit to it. But if you take this along slowly, 100 people, 650 people, another 325 people, now the community is getting involved. So by the time it gets on the ballot, people are involved. I just, the referendum, I mean, I'm not even talking about the referendum. That's a different issue. You have a short period of time, you feel a sense of panic. Gotcha, got that. Got all that. But this, all we have to do is say, is put timelines in that are fair, force the council to address it, make deadlines for the 2.5% that are reasonable, change the language so that it's not, that every single year at an election, it can go on the ballot. Now it says biennial, but remember the biennial language was in there before we changed the way that we did elections. So that shouldn't even be counted. It should be every single year you should be able to put something on the ballot. The idea that a disapproval should be able to be appealed through referendum. Well, a disapproval is a nothing. It means it's dead. An approval is an active item. That's why you get to referendum. I approve something. Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, yes, I did. No, you didn't. But if you disapprove something, it's dead. The only place where you can't referendum a no vote. You have to think about it before. I mean, I understand the creativity of it, but it's not the way you do business. It's not right. Something that's a no vote is gone and it has to come up again. That's how our rules work. Finally, these communities, just for like, I want to put this out there. The communities that Al cited, I just want to go through the numbers because I actually looked at the charters, and so I'll tell you what and I'll be happy to send them to you. Amesbury, in order to get an initiative, requires 20% of their registered voters. And it's true that they don't have to go to supplemental. If Al would agree to 20%, I would get rid of the supplemental. I mean, that's a lot of votes. So, so that's what that is. Southbridge is the one that I would concede for Al. They have 5% of previous voters, and if the council doesn't approve it, it goes right to the ballot. That is one place, Southbridge. Winthrop is 5% recent election, and they do have a supplemental 5% of the recent election. Long Meadow's a town meeting, so I don't, Danny, can you let Sandy in, please? Long Meadow's town meeting. So basically anything initiated is initiating, through warrants and however that procedure works. Yes, there's a referendum procedure, but we're not talking about the referendum. And Montague's the same thing. There's 126 members. So, I personally think, to begin with, that the way that the charter provision 7.7 is written right now is, number one, okay. Number two, follows the vote of the people, because the referendum portion, the supplemental referendum portion, is 2.5%, which is exactly what is said that people are looking for. I just don't know. But I would be willing to do this. I do think that what Amherst does is interesting because they give a smaller number to get in front of the city council, which I think I heard Isaac say, and I think Catherine, I don't want to speak for Al, but he's into the small numbers from the beginning. So maybe that, and then they have a 5% of registered voters, supplemental. And so there's basically saying, let's not wait. Let's get as much done as we can up front. Let's get the people out there in front of the council. You get your 100 people for a public hearing. You get 200. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with 250, but just for, so it's 2.5%, which is only another 75 people. So you put that before the council. You have your debate. Plus, the council might actually amend or change the petition in a way that is agreeable to people. So, and then you go out and do your supplemental, which means that you're getting the momentum necessary to put something on a ballot. I have to tell you, I just cannot support a government which is sitting over here and is basically, let's keep going to ballot to answer all our questions. Let's just go to the ballot. Let's just circumvent our local government and just go to the ballot. There's nothing about this initiative process that is oppressive at all. And believe me, once you get on the ballot, you're going to have to do all the hard work that everybody's talking about they have to do up front, even 10 times more. So that's what I have to say. So Al, I would ask you, I saw that you filed sort of a petition in the packet. Is your position on this that if we don't agree with how you want to proceed, that you have people ready to file a petition with the city council? So this conversation is really not about trying to find a place where we can agree, but kind of having everybody just say their piece and move on?
No, I don't want to waste your time or my time. The reason I put that in the packet, in full disclosure, is that, yes, I have been sitting on a petition since last spring. When the city council, when I was at the point where the city council was apparently satisfied with a 3.5-minute discussion that took place one evening at the ordinances committee, where the chairman essentially took up the 3.5 minutes and said that what the voters told me was that they wanted no change. And, I thought at that point, I thought this is a new low. If that's where we are with this discussion, a serious discussion about 7-7 citizen initiatives, then I better have ready to go something that brings this back to the council in a different form. Because frankly, what the voters were saying, and I think you saw an editorial from a citizen saying that this is what people were trying to say, and this was said any number of times, even in the recorder. You may remember that the recorder editorialized in favor of no on one, and one of the things they said, and I thought it was very simple, is that what the voters were saying was they didn't want the referendum process to be made harder. It wasn't just that they were saying we don't like 7%, like a 7% solution, is that they understood that 7% was significantly higher, maybe 3 times higher than the current. And they said, well, all this is really doing at bottom line is it's making getting a referendum harder. So that was the message. And the message was that we don't want a change that we consider to be negative. It's not that we don't want any change for anything. So therefore, when we shift the lens and go to 7-7, the message still remains we don't want any change. Nobody said that. In fact, I asked repeatedly for 7-7 to be on the ballot because I thought, frankly, let's do 7-7 and 7-8 at the same time. But nobody wanted to do that. The Charter Review Committee did not want to do that. But I was on record saying it several times. So I would say, David, that no, I'm here for a sincere reason that I want to see us come up with a better 7-7 than what we've got. I think that the voters did say something positive. I'm sure there are people who think that it was a protest vote and a negative vote, but it was actually a vote for the citizens to be able to approach their government. And I also want to say, David, that you and I agree on a lot of things and some things we don't agree on, but I think that I have not, in the 40 years that I've lived in this community, I have not seen much frivolity in the bringing forth of initiatives or with referendums. Maybe you could point out one or two of them for me, but we by and large are not being ruled by like in California where there's a ballot questions.
It's new
every November. But what I'm saying is that I haven't seen that in Greenfield. I don't think we'll see it in Greenfield. But let me tell you an anecdote that I thought was really interesting. When the city council was coming to vote on the issue of zoning on the French King, a councilor called me and said, there's a citizen who's threatening a referendum if we vote for this. What do you think? Do you think that person could get it? I said, well, if you have a bunch of people who are unhappy with that vote, a yes vote on the zoning, I'm sure they can come up with enough signatures to get on the ballot. But then the question becomes, are they going to be able to get enough votes to win at the ballot? And David, you and I know better than almost anybody. And I would include Isaac in that as well, that we know what's required to win a ballot. It's not easy. You, as you said, and I have said, it takes 3 or 4 times the effort to actually get voters to turn out for your referendum than it does to get signature papers to qualify. So I think that like Catherine, I don't want to ever feel we're suppressing the consent of the governed to say, this is what we want. Let us speak. That's why I think that when you say, final comment I would make, David, is that when you say a no vote is a nothing, it's not a nothing. It's a rejection of an idea that voters may think should be challenged. They wanted a yes, they got a no. That is a vote. And that is not nothing. That means that they didn't get what they wanted. And I believe that in all fairness to the citizens, who those on one side are going, please vote for this, and the others on the other side saying, don't vote for it, that either side should have the ability to say, okay, we really feel strongly that this is wrong. And I would not say, in terms of the 7-7 and the supplemental, if you're saying to me, you all know probably that there's a section of our charter, I don't know if it's 7.5 or 7.6, whatever. There's a section of the charter that allows an individual petition. I believe that I'm the only citizen in Greenfield that has ever used that section to bring a petition. No, Isaac, you tell us who else has. But I brought one forward a few years ago as an individual and brought it to the council, knowing that what it says under that section is that the council must act. It doesn't say anything else. So the council said, hey, thanks for coming in, Al. Have a nice day. And that was the end of that. But if you said to me, David, I want to have the 7-7 begin with 10 people. 10 people can come to the council and they can come in with a petition saying that they want to initiate a new idea in local government. And the council says no, that then they have the 2.5%. Because I don't, for me to put credence into the concept that 2.5% of voters of the electorate or voters voting, 2.5% of registered voters, to give credence to that, then don't put a big front end on it. You know, if you want, let 10 people come in, or 20 people, or 30 people, or 50 people, but let people be able to come in, get that testing the waters with the council. Council says, no way, just not interested. Let them go out and initiate something with 2.5%. If you truly believe, as I do, that 2.5% is a reasonable number, which is what I put in that petition that several hundred people signed, I think that that's doable. But if you want to front load it with 5% of total voters and then 2.5% of total voters, 7.5% clearly was not anything that people in last November were willing to accept after hearing a lot of back and forth on that. I think it's way too much. You know, anything where you're getting up to 1,000 signatures is way too high. So I would be willing to entertain a notion that if you really want to have a supplemental step, make that the 2.5% and make the initial step light. Don't require people with a good idea to have to come in with armloads full of signatures for something that the council is just going to laugh at and say, get out of here. But that I think is reasonable. If you're talking about in the range of 400 or so, I could probably live with it.
Thank you, Al. All right, Catherine.
Sorry for the background noise. A few things. I wanted to respond to you, David. I hear your passion, and I really want to respect it, and I'm still kind of grappling to understand it. And I hope that you can hear that, like, I'm really trying to understand it, and there's a few disagreements that I had. One, you started by talking about the Constitution, and of course, any Constitution is a very important document. And our country didn't start as a participatory democracy. As much in name as we've called ourselves a democracy, we haven't been a very participatory democracy. And so I'm interested in moving in that direction. I feel honored to be part of the legislative body, and I do think that there is an importance of respecting that form of legislation or legislating. But I don't agree that just because we did not start as a participatory democracy, we shouldn't move in that direction. Another thing, and there's a few others. Another is, I don't agree that this is the current number, if I'm doing the math right, to get an initiative on the ballot is, the number I have is 1013. And the number that, even though I voted, I didn't vote with the majority of the people personally. The number that people did vote for was 337. I don't think that this current initiative process mirrors the will of the people voting. And I don't understand. I hear you talking about the engagement of the people. I don't see why make those thresholds so hard to meet. You talked about first the petition, then the first numbers to bring in, then the supplemental. I don't understand the rationale of making it those thresholds that with the stages. And I understand that the initiative process doesn't require 2 stages, but you named those 3 stages, so I'm saying that. I do think, my personal experience working on the Safe City Ordinance and having it go to referendum, I'll be completely honest, the language I've been using in my own mind is that if you're going to change the vote, you should have some type of organizing chops. You should demonstrate that you have the ability to get something passed. And I think that the precinct number is part of demonstrating that effort, demonstrating that ability. I live and represent Precinct 1. I've knocked on all the Democrat and enrolled doors. It's totally possible. Yes, the houses are a little bit farther apart, but it's totally possible. And so I hear your passion in it, but I don't yet understand why the thresholds would be that high.
The number you have is incorrect.
Okay, tell me the number then.
It's 10% of the people in the previous election, which would be, the previous election was 2,800 people, so it'd be 280 people, or 5%, whichever is greater. So 5% of our registered voters is 675 people.
No, but
I'm talking about total. I'm talking about the total.
The total is then another 325. So it's whatever. Oh, 1,013. That's what. So
yeah.
you think 1,013 is too many people to place something on the ballot?
I do. I think it's a really high number. I think it's really hard to gather.
So what about an initial situation of relatively no number, like Amherst has 250, and then go out for your 650 people?
I'm curious to hear what Isaac has to say. He's had his hand raised. I'm curious to hear his thoughts.
So Dave, I'm trying to think outside the box, find a solution that meets sort of where everyone wants to be. And when I think about running referendum processes, I think about ballot access generally. I think it should be harder to have a referendum or an initiative than it is to run for office, right? I think that's the bottom line. You should have to do more work than the people who are actually sitting there putting their time and effort in. On the other hand, I don't necessarily agree that collecting signatures activates the electorate. Some people will sign signatures just to get me out of their face, right? And it's not, some people will sign anything, and some people can be tricked into signing things that they don't understand. And so I'm not sure it has that. In the best world, it does those things, Dave, but I'm not sure it always does those things. And we've seen people who've collected signatures fail at referendum by a significant margin, not even close. So I think it requires much more to pass a ballot initiative than the collection of the signatures. The collection of the signatures, in my view, is a symbol of how serious the people who are about bringing this are, right? How serious are you? Is this important enough for you, or are you doing it on a whim because of a mood, right? And to that extent, one way people do ballot access, not in Massachusetts, right, and I'm sure it's not in any other communities, is they ask people to put their money where their mouth is. And I am wondering, one of the concerns I have as a counselor has always been with putting referendums on is the additional costs of an election, especially a special election. I would feel much better about it. While I still think that it's important for counselors to weigh in, I think they have more expertise than the general electorate on most municipal issues, because most people don't have all of the information, and education campaigns don't go on the way we would like them to happen. In other states, they allow people to buy their way on the ballot. And I wonder if there is a bifurcated method that allows people to either collect a higher number of signatures or pay for a substantial cost of the election. If they put down a $5,000 bond cost filing fee, would that alleviate the burden for some people, for the people who thinks it's too onerous, right? You can buy your way out of the collection, or you collect. Now, I'm not saying this is the right answer. I understand the inequities that come with that, but I'm trying to find a way that we can reasonably do this. My initial thoughts about, and I think you know this, Dave, about the amount of signatures it should require is like about 150 to get in front of the council, and then another 500 to get onto the ballot, which is 650. It's somewhere less than what we have now. It's substantially more than what Al wants. And what I really like about those two numbers of 150 and 500 are that they're numbers that people who collect signatures are familiar with, because it takes 150 signatures to run for state rep, and it takes 500 signatures to run for any county office. I find it hard to believe that it should be more difficult to put a question on the municipal ballot than it does to run for sheriff or district attorney, right?
But running for office isn't the same thing as voting in an ordinance.
I understand that, but the threshold for running for office in Greenfield is 50, right? So it's not, we're talking about a municipal ordinance or any of the other things that might go to the ballot should be substantially harder than running for municipal office, but not necessarily more substantial than running for county office.
Go ahead, Danny.
Sorry, I'm taking notes on my phone so I can remember what I'm going to say. This is a good group. So I just want to point out that we don't know why voters voted the way they did. Okay. So we don't know that they rejected it because it was too high. People could have rejected it because it was too low. So we can't really understand. And we can't, as individuals, you're not going to have a scientific sample size. I'm sorry, you're not, about why people voted the way they are. You're not going to know by talking to your neighbors. And I agree with Isaac that the first part of his point about the local office. Yes, I do believe that it should be a higher threshold to get something on the ballot than it is to run for office. I completely agree with that. And so this is something I'm thinking of, and this is, again, something we can't know, but, this is a group of pretty plugged in people. So I'm kind of contradicting what I just said, but we can kind of think in our heads. Do we know how many times, that we are aware of that someone has done a good faith effort or wanted to put something forward as an initiative, and they could not get the number of signatures needed to do it? I can't really think of a time where we knew it was actually happening and then it didn't happen. I'd have to really think hard, but if you guys think about that, it doesn't seem to me that the number currently is that there's an overwhelming feeling that it's too onerous for most people. It happens, and it is kind of part of what it is. Isaac's idea about paying for the election, and it makes me a little cringy, but I also kind of appreciate the out of the box thinking. And then I realized there actually already is a way that this happens right now, is that you can pay professional signature gatherers to go get your signatures, and people do it all the time, especially for state initiatives. So there's already a pay to get on the ballot scenario. So I guess I'm saying that so that I put aside my cringe response at first, because well, we already have that. And that was what I was thinking about too, in terms of things like when you have one group of people putting something forward and then the rest of the community, as David pointed out, is just, living their lives. And they're like, oh, wait, no, I disagree with that. And now they have to get organized and raise money and do all this stuff. So it is an activation thing where now suddenly you have to be running a campaign for something that you didn't even have the wherewithal to care that much about, because somebody else is putting something forward that you completely disagree with. Now you have to. That's not really helping add to the argument. These are just thoughts as you guys were all talking. And then the last thing is, I like the spirit of having it be easier to go to the council and then a higher threshold to get on the ballot. This is, like I said, we are still, I know we have to talk theoretically and for the future, and for any person or group of people that might be on the council. But we still have a situation where our town is relatively small. People know each other. You can talk to your counselors and get happen. Somebody's in the chat asking about the 5G petition. I don't know what happened with the 5G petition. So that might be an example of.
Okay, you done?
Yeah.
So let me ask this question. Catherine, let me ask you this question. I'm with you 100% about allowing people to participate in our government. How are you going to ensure, if things go to the ballot with a low number of people, that it's a fair fight going into the vote? How do we know? I mean, when you have a town meeting, which is kind of, if you bring this number down enough, we might as well go back to town meeting, because we're really creating another parallel government. We're really saying, if you don't have the supplemental, here's the parallel government. We're 325 people who really think this is the way Greenfield should be. We're putting this thing up to the council. Thank you very much. Oh, you don't agree with us? Oh, we're going on the ballot. So that could happen like every month. So, and I know, it hasn't happened before, but you don't make governments because things happen before. So how do you, if I'm at town meeting and I go to vote, and Catherine, you get up and say something, I can get up and say something to try to educate you as to why I'm voting the way I am. And there might be a lot of people. And by the time and just like at the council meeting, I noticed that you're very involved with listening to the other counselors. So it's an opportunity to debate before you vote. When it goes on the ballot, where does it go? It goes to two camps who one wants one thing, one wants another. It becomes a propaganda show for each side to force the community, to tell the community what's the best way to do things. You don't have any other avenue to do it. You don't have a moderated, fair system of communication. I mean, one side might go out and hire somebody that's really a good marketer. And the other side might be, well, I can't afford to do that. And then that's where it goes. It goes to the ballot and everybody votes. They're misinformed. There was never a debate. There was never a discussion. It's decided that way. So that's my fear. So if we could move it to a place, and if 1,031 votes is too high, okay, it's not the number for me. It's more the idea that the city council is the first stop, and that people have to work hard to get the city council to see their point of view. Because we just went through a whole thing called electing 13 councilors to do our business. Otherwise, we would be a town. And then at some point, whatever that point is, I mean, supplemental, non-supplemental, it doesn't matter. There has to be a certain number of people that say, all right, you're not listening to us. You're the first stop, but you're not listening to us. Mm-hmm. We're going to take this out because now we have no choice. We have to go out and we have to have other people hear it because you're frustrated. We're frustrated by the fact that we're a large enough group of people. We have momentum. You're not listening to us. That's what the ballot was set up to do. You're not listening to us. So therefore, we have no other choice but to go to the ballot.
You're talking about
325 people, excuse me, Al, 325 people initiating petitions. Good luck. And then going straight to the ballot. I mean, if that's where people want to go, then that's fine. The last thing I want to say to you, Al, is I don't know what you're talking about in terms of Section 7.6. If you get 100 people, you have the right to a public hearing. So if you felt frustrated by the fact that this committee gave you 3.5 minutes, why don't you just get 100 signatures and go for a public hearing in front of the city council? It's right there.
Can I respond?
I'd like to respond.
First, I'm going to let Catherine respond.
What, did you want me to respond?
I do, but I'm going to let Catherine respond to the first part, and then I'll have Catherine respond to the second.
Thanks, Al. I'm piecing this through. So I'm wanting to understand. I'm going to respond with some question to you, David, because I'm trying to understand what the fear is. So let me see if I'm understanding you clearly. I think where you and I have agreement is that Plan A is going to the council. And we want that process to be taken really seriously for many reasons, including the fact that councilors invested a lot of time in that, citizens invest a lot of time in that, a lot of effort is put into the process of trying to get something past city council. And given that we have a city, and we've decided that we have a city, the city is Plan A. And I think that I'm trying to track what you just said, and I want to see how this lands with you. So I think we have agreement on that. And I didn't like either of the two proposals that we had to vote on last November. I did vote for the higher number because of my personal experience and seeing that I do think that council process should be taken seriously. And it shouldn't be that easy for us residents to circumvent the first process. I don't think that should be that hard either. But I think there's many different pieces to what you just said, and I'm trying to understand the question. The first thing you said is, how do you make it a fair fight? And I'm still trying to understand what you mean by a fair fight. Like, I think that we're all grappling with, maybe your question is like, what's the threshold that makes it a fair fight? And so that's one. And you said, that's my fear. You said people not being informed, there being fights and propaganda, and what is the fear of because I have a lot of trust and I want the first Plan A to be taken seriously. And I also have a lot of faith in people enough faith in people to make informed choices when they go to the ballot, which may be different than my opinion. But so I'm wondering what the fear is
Thank you. I'll answer that, but Al's in waiting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can answer, David, and then I'll.
I don't see the ballot as a first place or a primary place to go to solve problems. I see the ballot as a protection for people who feel like they're being marginalized by their government. Then you go to the ballot. It's like, you know, I've done the best I could and you're still not listening. I'm going to go to the ballot. If you don't have a supplemental, there is no pressure for the city council, because if they say no, it's like, well, I don't care what you say. I don't even have to negotiate with you. The reason I'm here is because I want it on the ballot. I don't really care what you have to say. I mean, what kind of a government is that? So this way, the way it's built now, again, forgetting the numbers, is you're building to a point when it finally gets on the ballot, people are like, all right, we've had it. You're not listening. Now, Al's frustrated that people weren't listening. But I say to you, Al, I don't know why you haven't, even before I set this up as a way to kind of, release the pressure, why didn't you just get 100 people and hold a public hearing? It would have been the best public hearing we ever had. It would have been filled with loads and loads of people who were happy. I see people on the computer. There probably would have been like hundreds of people coming to talk about it. And we could have had a really good discussion. That would have been the forerunner of then the next step, which is now if the city council were to say, well, we don't agree with you, we're not voting on that. Then you say, okay, well, I got a lot of people here and I'm going to go out and get a petition, and you go get the petition and you move your way through the system because you're not being heard.
Can I respond?
But 325 people is not, that's a parallel government.
Oh my God. David, can I respond?
Of course.
So you're making exactly the point that I made a few minutes ago when I said clearly I had a petition with 200 plus names on it, some of whom are watching this council meeting, this subgroup meeting. Some are on tonight. I had more than 200 names gathered for a group petition under Section 7.6, I think it is. Do you know why I held that? I've had that since last May.
I have no idea.
Okay, well, here's the reason. Because of my desire to make the council the place you go first. Because my feeling was, I started gathering petitions, signatures, because I realized, I had a lot of help doing it, I realized that the Ordinances Committee had given short shrift to many things that I thought were important to be considered. And it was my faith in the council that put that petition in the drawer. And instead, I went back to the council and I said to the council, I believe that we have not really brought out the feeling of what people want from an initiative process. It is broken. It's dilatory. It's very confusing. And I want to bring it back to you. And do you know that the council, including the ordinances chair, said, okay, we'll set up this committee. And in fact, Al, if you want to, you can be on it. So I, in good faith, said, all right, fine. And I did not go the route of a group petition, which I think would have been a hearing where I and other people got our 3 minutes to speak, and then no interaction after that. And I could go on at length about why I think the council's procedural rules are broken. But rarely does a chair of a council, rarely does the president ever turn to someone in the audience and say, okay, I'd like to hear from Mr. Jones or Mrs. Williams about this. I know they have a lot of vested interest and subject matter expertise, or a counselor raises their hand and says, Chairman so-and-so, President, I'd like to hear from so-and-so. That doesn't happen. So it's not, that kind of a hearing is a very, let me just say, an empty experience. I don't value it. I was willing to do it just to force the council to consider, because with a group petition, they don't really have to do anything. An individual petition, they don't have to do a thing, but with a group petition, they have to act, and that means they can just say, we're going to table it. That's an action. So I have, many of you know me that I'm often at subcommittee meetings. I monitored many of the Charter Review Committee hearings, and many of the economic development ordinances. I spent a lot of my personal time in front of a screen or in person, listening to and watching the council and being unable to speak. So I think I've shown extraordinary confidence in the city council's ability to listen and hear people. I don't always agree with what it decides, and when it does something that I feel has been egregious in ignoring something important or is doing harm to the community, I do consider that there are times when initiative petitions and referendums are absolutely critical. The idea of the citizens of this city being called a parallel council is anathema to everything I believe in. They are not. We are not. We are the governed, and we put confidence in our elected officials, but we still want from time to time consent of the governed. And I don't believe in third rail of government. These sayings that have come
I
up
didn't
from time
say
to
third.
time.
I didn't say, don't
David, let me
misquote
finish.
me. I didn't say third rail.
Let me finish. I'm not saying
No,
you did.
don't misquote me.
No, you said that during the
I
hearing.
said third form, not rail.
No, David, don't get into this with me because we can talk offline about it, or maybe not.
I'm not lying about it. People are watching. Don't call me something that's not true. I said third form of government. Please stick to it. Al, point of order. Don't disparage me. It's a false claim. Say what you need to say, but do not disparage me. Thank you.
Are you, David? Let me say for the record, I can demonstrate that third rail of government was a quote that was said during the Charter Review Committee. But let's not get into it. I'm not disparaging. I'm not disparaging you. You're a colleague. You're a good friend. I'm not disparaging you. I'm saying that when I hear parallel government, it gives me that same shiver that these other third branch of government, just as bad as third rail. Third branch of government, we're not. We're together in this. We're a small town. We're all part of the governmental process. And it's important that we have the ability to make things happen, particularly when we're unhappy. When we're happy, we don't talk to each other. We just say we're all happy and we leave. Sometimes we're unhappy. So we need to have a mechanism that works. I don't want to disparage the people, David. I know you're concerned that I'm disparaging you. I don't want to disparage the good people who bring these things forward. They're wonderful people and they're passionate, like you are, like I am. So we're on the same team. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm on the same team with you.
Okay. Are you the quarterback or the end? Al,
I think I'm alignment. I think I'm alignment, frankly.
Isaac, what do you have to say?
Dave, first of all, I want to thank everyone I'm serving on this committee with. I value each of you. One of the reasons why I agreed to serve on this committee when I was asked is because I knew Al was serving. There's very few citizens I know who are more engaged in government, especially as a private citizen, than Mr. Norman. So it's one of the pleasures of my public service to serve on this committee with you. Dave and I have both clashed many times over issues and have come to compromise and reach reasonable solutions that got us through a period of time. And then sometimes we had to change things down the road. And people work together to create some consensus, and things change over time. And that is why I think, and I'm saying this all to get back to Catherine's question, which is why, and the question about supplemental and why it's so important. When the council takes up an issue that is brought to them, there's more than one point of view on that issue. It's not just the petitioners who are for it. There are often people who are adamantly against it. And so often the answer is somewhere in between. It's not, do we ban all socks? It's not, do we let all socks happen? Maybe the problem is only the blue socks, right? And so the council comes together and hears from all the parties. They hear from the experts. They listen to the technical challenges that are related to something, and they spend hours on issues. They don't get the soundbite that a voter gets about the issue. And there's not big money being spent. I mean, I know money is spent on these municipal campaigns. It's usually lawn signs, right? We're not talking about a big educational campaign. And the problem is that when the council, in cases where the council just up or down rejects or accepts an issue, it's pretty clear, and I understand that. My concern is when the council does what it does the best job, and it listens to all sides and it crafts a different solution that is not the solution that's proposed. Either a compromise solution or a completely different solution. And by the way, that sometimes takes a lot of time to do. When they do that, that is considered a rejection. And then suddenly all this really hard work by informed people who had the full scope of the information from all sides and technical experts and financial experts, and that all happened, that happens. And if you can easily go to ballot after that, that presents a problem to me, not only because it disincentivizes, as David says, the willingness of councilors to actually engage in that activity, but what it does is, because the very same people who provide all that expertise at the council, most of whom are town employees, are statutorily prohibited from participating in the electoral process, it becomes very hard to get that information out there, right? You have to have a group of people who are as passionate on the other side and are willing to spend the money and get things going. And so often those people are coming from behind, right? They're coming not having been engaged in the conversation because they were entrusting the council to take reasonable and appropriate action. And so they're coming at it just learning that now there's this crisis situation of having this ballot measure coming that seems unreasonable, especially in light of what the council's compromise might have been. And they aren't organized. They haven't collected signatures. They haven't gone door to door. They haven't gotten people to go out to council meetings to talk about it. They silently entrusted the council to the people that they voted for to act on their behalf, right? And so when David talks about a fair fight, they're running from behind, right? And that is one of the challenges. The signature collection effort is a signal to people that, hey, there's an issue that's coming up. We need to start paying attention to it, right? Because they're actually trying to get something on the ballot. It gets news coverage that there's a ballot initiative signatures being collected because it's filed with the town clerk. So the newspaper and radio will cover it. It sort of wakes up the rest of the public that there's an issue. It gives time for them to maybe organize if they think they need to, because there's a period of time at which they need to collect the signatures. So it gives the other side the time to sort of get themselves together. And that other side are normally non-activists. So they have a huge learning curve of how to do this. I think the example of the library is a really interesting example of it, because I think the library was so successful because the people who filed the petition were not organized ahead of time. The library was organized ahead of time. They were the ones coming into it. Had the council voted down the library, right, which could happen, they would have been in a huge advantage already than the people who were opposed. I think the issue that you worked on, the Safe City Ordinance, is a good example too. You were organizers, you pushed that forward. And when it went to ballot, the people who were opposed to it were not really engaged, right? So there's a huge advantage to being early engaged. There's a huge advantage to being the ones pushing the issue with the council in the subsequent election, the subsequent ballot initiative. And active engaged citizens should probably have an advantage, right? I think Al would agree with that. If you're paying attention and you're involved, you should have an advantage. Shame on those people for not paying attention, right? But my hope is the people that we're not overcoming what is sort of their safeguard, which is electing people they agree with the council to be reasonable and try to craft compromise and come up with the right solution. Because most people, most days, are more interested in their lawn, their kids' orthodonture, making sure that they can, take their shoes off after a long day of work. They don't have the time or energy to be active, engaged citizens on every issue that comes down. And so they do their civic duty by going out to vote. And are they going to vote on a citizen initiative? Sure, they're going to vote on a citizen initiative, but they're not going to know that citizen initiative in the way that they know their neighbor, right? That they know the person who they've seen in the neighborhood, the candidate who's coming forward. They're not going to know it in the same way that they know something that they're actively paying attention to and have been for a long time, something that's been part of a big public debate, that's been part of a big process. I agree with Al that this whole system should be easier to understand. I think we probably have pretty close to universal agreement that maybe flat numbers might be an easier way to do this, but what I am most concerned about, rather than the access, is the process, and that it drives the process that creates the best government. And I don't misattribute anyone with bad motives here. I think everyone is trying to do the right thing. The question is, how do we reach that threshold that encourages counselors to engage and compromise and doesn't undermine that? And because that solves the most problems when counselors listen, engage, and compromise. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. Danny?
I wanted to respond to something Isaac said about the, representative government and the city councilors who are working. They spend hours and hours on things, and the fact that I love that when something comes forward in one form, it gets moved around, talked about, discussed, talked to experts. The piece that I've really learned very firsthand in the last 3 years is like the effects of how that actually works operationally in the city once it's passed. When something goes through that kind of sausage machine and then comes out different than what the initial citizens brought forward, but it's beautiful and it'll actually work and it's actually enforceable and doable, I love that. But yeah, that is considered a rejection. So that's really important to think about. And in communities with town meetings, I don't know. And I grew up in Montague, so like we had it. My parents were members when I was a kid. I don't know how the heck you get stuff done with, a couple hundred people in a room a couple times a year. I just don't get it. I really have to say that I love that we have gone to a city and that we have this form of government with these benchmarks and these people that represent others, and where there's some accountability that lies with certain people. And so I don't want to inadvertently take that away. And I know we keep talking about it, and that it hasn't been abused, and we don't have examples of that happening. But I'll just reiterate, it's happening all over the country. And did I hear right, Al, you actually are sitting on a petition around this exact topic that we are meeting in a subcommittee about right now?
Yes, I mean, I sent it to you. It's part of the material.
No, I know. I just want you to say it out loud again so everybody hears it.
Yeah, yes, because I'm using that as an example of me saying that I give the council and the subcommittees of the council and the subgroups, I give them enormous leeway in trying to show me that change can happen without resorting to what I consider to be the most painful of all opportunity, which is to have a referendum or an initiative. And I know personally, from having done it for the past 30 years, from 1993 to the present, and there are others on this committee that know this, that it's no fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's work. You have to raise money. You have to form a committee. You have to make political finance reports. You have to tell the IRS what you're up to. It's a lot of work.
I know.
I don't relish doing it. And for the people who have not had the experience of doing it, I certainly don't ever want to discourage them from doing it. But I have demonstrated by the fact that I have a petition. I have it. I could use it tomorrow if I wanted to. I don't want to, but I'm making the point that this is an
But now I'm
example.
wondering because this is still my time and you're just answering me. But so I'm just wondering, like, what is your threshold at which you're like, you know what, this committee is not satisfying me? I hear a lot of people talking about their experience on here. You're the one who pointed out that you're the only non-former city councilor. That was 12 years ago for me, so it's a long time ago.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of I statements coming out of your mouth about this stuff, and it just feels like I'm personally concerned that if this doesn't go exactly precisely the way you want, that you're going to petition this anyway. So I feel like it feels a little bit of bad faith. I'm just going to say it to you. I'm open-minded in here. I'm fully open to what we're going to do. And I just want to make sure that everybody else is too.
Well, I'm spending another evening with you to demonstrate that I'm here to see if we can reach agreement on the major points of a 7-7 initiative that I don't ever have to use that petition as a way of making change. But I do believe that petitions are valuable. I wouldn't be taking my time and spending all the effort that it goes into being on a committee that as all of you know, if I was just blowing smoke by you and could just say, hey, look, I don't really care what you come up with. I've already got what I want. It's my way or the highway. I've never been that way with stuff that comes up. People are often surprised that I'm still listening to them. And I'm sometimes surprised that people are still listening to me, but I've been doing this for 30 years. My good friend Isaac knows, this guy has been with me for 30 years in back and forth and all kinds of stuff where we've agreed, disagreed. I am not drawing hard lines on any of this. I'm here tonight threw out a bunch of suggestions, the things that are the best ideas that I had, and said, debate them, discuss them, let's talk about them. What do you have? I'm not done with this process, but I'm being completely honest with you that I last spring had some of my dear friends help me gather petition signatures. And I also told you earlier in the meeting that I had a city councilor call me and say that if we vote against the French King industrial zoning, are we going to have a referendum against us? What do you think? And that tells me that counselor was, and I guess this is in a way a good thing. That counselor was concerned that if we don't do what the people want us to do, we could end up with a referendum, the big bad referendum. And the reality is, the big bad referendum is only as good as the people who run the campaign. And if they're lousy organizers, they lose.
Right.
That's the history of in Greenfield in a nutshell.
I just do want to bring it back, though, is that we do have there's already a process to do that. And we're charged with deciding if those numbers and how they are now still work for us or not. And what I'm saying is that that I'm committed to doing that with you, but I don't believe in these scenarios of if this happens, every Tuesday we're going to have a new initiative petition, and every Wednesday a new referendum. I didn't used to either, but I'll tell you what, you cannot believe I got to figure out a way to say this just right, but the amount of work that I cannot, so I'll use an I statement that I can't personally get done that is listed on my job description on a weekly basis because of the world has changed in the last few years, and people are, for better or sometimes worse, more engaged, but because of things that are happening, I have employees who want cameras in City Hall, people come in screaming at us, like the way that the world has changed. So I don't think these are ifs. I think this is a very possibility that anybody will, people are weaponizing all over the country the way that government is structured and the access they have to public servants and elected officials to get their way when the regular process of American democracy isn't working. And I'm seeing that starting to happen. I didn't expect to even talk about this, but it made me think about it when it's like all these, these theoretical scenarios aren't really theoretical.
Yeah, but the people who are here today.
Al, please. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Catherine's been waiting patiently.
I'm sorry. All right.
If you raise your hand, I'll come back to you next. Catherine, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. Okay, so a few things. One is I believe that I'm hearing consensus that going to council is plan A, and that that's important to all of us. When I got into council, which wasn't the plan, I was just part of it. I was curious about what I was going to learn, and looking forward to what I'd be surprised by. I didn't expect, Isaac, honestly, that one of the surprises was that I would be agreeing with you a lot on an issue related to what we really disagreed with 4 years ago. So I'm feeling surprised and amused by that.
I hear that all the time.
And you, Isaac.
And so so a lot of what you just said, I really agree with. And I see the value in the initial phase of going to council with a low number of lowish, what is low? That's subjective, a lowish number of signatures. And I'm curious about starting to chew on some concrete things. I am not attached to specific numbers. There are things that I'm hearing that I'm liking. I'm wondering if we started to chew on, I heard the 150 and the 500. I'm more attached to, I really think it's important that there's representation by precinct, because I do think that that's a way, gathering signatures in precinct 1 is a way that people are demonstrating that they are going to have a real campaign. And Al, I read through your list of how to streamline the process and make it simple for voters, and I didn't see anything there that I immediately disagreed with. I'm concerned about the 6 months. I don't want things to languish. And so I would prefer 3 months, or a shorter amount of time so that people can really get their thing done. And so I'm wondering, I'm hearing these specifics that are resonating with me. And I'm wondering about how do we move to the next phase of this conversation? And bring forward something that, like, hearing what's been said here tonight, bringing forward to the next meeting. We're at 7:42. Something that a proposal that we might grapple with, chew on more specifically. I don't have a proposal for that, but those are things I'm hearing, and I'm wondering how we might move toward doing that.
Good question. Al?
Yeah, thank you, David. I just, I wanted to say, I actually meant to say this earlier. Listening to Isaac's argument about why 60 days is not enough time for the council, I actually believe that's probably correct. 6 months, I think, is too long, just because by 6 months, the people are so discouraged, they're figuring the council has left them. But I would be certainly willing to see a longer period of time. I was just trying to say that we want to make sure that a council can't ignore you.
Yeah.
So that after 6 months they say, hey, guess what? We've done nothing. Well, I'd like to see that, because I agree with Isaac. I've watched the council long enough that I know that getting it done in 2 sessions, basically, because it only meets once a month, and then you've got the subcommittees. It's probably really asking for too much to be able to say, okay, excuse me, it's time to move this on. So I would say that probably 3 months is more reasonable. Maybe you could convince me longer, but 6 months I think is too long. But I agree with Isaac that 60 days is probably not enough time, even though I'm a pretty impatient person. When I bring something before the council, I don't want to have to wait until another birthday rolls around. But I'm certainly flexible on that. And Catherine, I'm delighted that some of these things are resonating with you, because I was genuinely excited to be writing some of these things, because some of these things I hadn't thought about at all. And David, I would like, if possible, to get a ruling from town council on the statement about a no vote can't be appealed, because it just seems to me that a decision one way or the other is still a decision, and it means something happens or doesn't happen. If town council said, city council said, nah, you can't do a no, you can't ask for something to be voted again if it's been rejected. I would like to know why legally it's not, because it strikes me. I don't, Isaac, what you think about that, but I just think that there are a number of issues that we should be able to deal with. And I also want to say this, that as proof of my respect for the work that the council does, that I went to the council, Mitch Spade, Joan Marie Jackson, who are on this call, and I went to the council to bring the issue of home equity reform. And do you know the council voted unanimously to support us? So I think that, I have great faith in going to Plan A, as Catherine called it. And I agree, Catherine, I think we have a consensus on that. So I'd be happy to work with anybody on coming up with a list of draft proposals.
Okay.
How you feel about 60 days to hold a public hearing and 120 days to have an up or down vote? Give people 2 months to have a public hearing, and then another 2 months to work on it after that, and have an up or down vote within 4 months.
Sounds more reasonable than more reasonable than 60 days and more reasonable than 6 months.
Can we all read the charter the way it's?
Yeah, I'm reading it right now.
Okay, so in order to give people enough time, you have up to 90 days to get your 5% of signatures. You can get your signatures in a week and submit it. So the 90 days isn't a negative or an impediment to the petitioner. It's actually a benefit, so that they have enough time before the petition goes stale.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the city council for 60 days, which is appropriate, so it could get to committee. And then you're given another 60 days to get your other signatures. If you get them in a week, it goes to the ballot. So literally, you could get, once you get your petition, you can go out in a week, go to the city council for 60 days, go out in another week. And that's how little time it is to get the thing on the ballot. Now, if it really takes a long time to get the signatures, that's all part of the work. But there's nothing in this law that spreads the time out and makes that happen. That's number one. Number two, okay, so I'll stop with that. Are you going to tell me that I'm wrong about my interpretation of that?
I'm reading it right now. So
No, I don't have it in front of me, David, but there was one point where I mapped out the timetable, and it lasted almost 365 days, because they were.
Oh, no, that's because you decided to say that. That's not the truth in the document.
Oh my goodness!
Why don't we read why don't we all read the document, and then we can?
You want me to pull up the charter section?
No, just everybody look at it.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's 60 days so that you have time to do it. Council has 60 days. That's the only thing that constrains the petitioners, is they have to wait for the council. Then you have another 60 days. You have 90 days, 60 days, not 60 days to get the other signatures. It's all for the benefit of the petitioners.
But we keep going. The process isn't over yet. Keep going.
Then you have to wait for either a special election or the next. Now it says biennial, and I said that absolutely should be changed. That's wrong. That's old language that is a misunderstanding. That's not right. It should be then you wait for the next fall election.
David, after you finish your supplemental gathering and go back to the council, then what happens?
No, you don't go back to the council. You supplement and hand it to the clerk. Clerk has to put it on the ballot. That's it.
If the number of signatures to the supplemental petition is found to be sufficient by the city clerk, the city council shall call a special election to be held on a date fixed by it that is not less than 120, no more nor more than 180 after the date of the certificate of the city clerk.
Okay, there's another 120 days right there.
Yeah.
Oh, 120 days. No, the 120 days is to wait for the campaign election. It's not.
That's for the election. That's not a waiting.
I'm saying
the clerk
It's to
point, the
give
clerk
Catherine a
says,
chance to set up
the clerk
a,
immediately acts by setting the date of the election, and the 120 days is the minimum amount of time to get ready to have an election, which is not a small thing to do.
All I'm saying is that if you're the initiative person and you're behind this campaign, you have a long slog ahead of you.
you know.
Oh,
you have the
well,
same
good luck
slog-
throwing together an
you
election in
you have
less
the
than
same-
120
you have
days.
the Same slog
supplemental-
as the Al Norman thing, except you don't have the supplemental 60 days. It's the same slog.
Well, I'm not saying take out 60 days. That's 60 days of wasted time gathering more signatures. Why are we doing that?
Okay,
Well,
so
that's your opinion, but go ahead.
if we're all
But I'm sorry, I just want to say one thing, Catherine.
Yes.
No, everybody had a
Sure.
chance to talk to everybody based on what
we
they
have
had
10
to say.
minutes.
Thank you, Catherine, for keeping us.
We
there.
have we have 10 minutes, and I would love next steps. I just want to, everyone's talking. So
I
throw
heard
myself in there.
I heard you on that, Catherine. Thank you. If the council, let's talk about, we keep going back to the referendum petition, but we're not talking about the referendum petition. We're talking about the initiative petition. If the council decides not to vote for zoning, how can you appeal that when the council's the only place that you can get the law to be passed unless you do an initiative petition? There's no, whatever was before the council is a nullity. You can't then vote to force the council to vote positive. You
Why
can't
not?
do that.
Why not? Why not?
Okay, I'll tell you what. You hold on to that thought. Why don't you send us some literature about how that works in other jurisdictions, and I'd be happy to look at it.
No, my suggestion was that you asked.
Well, okay, fine. All right. So
Well,
Catherine,
you have two great
Catherine,
lawyers here.
I think
You
the
guys
next,
can figure it out.
my suggestion is at the next meeting that everybody bring their idea of what 7-7 should look like.
Ooh,
Really?
that's fun. Okay.
So
And
seven, you want us to
everybody see
submit a
if they could get
proposed
people.
draft?
Everybody submit a draft.
No. It doesn't have to be it has to be like, the general, a very cryptic,
Outline.
Start here, this many signatures, this much, whatever you want, but not the same language as this, but just your idea of how we go from people getting interested in doing an initiative petition to how it gets on the ballot. Just those steps as we've been talking about them. Everybody does it, and let's see what everybody's ideas are, so that we can see if we can reach consensus by seeing what everybody's ideas are. We've heard Al's idea. I guess you heard my idea. I haven't heard Catherine's idea. I haven't heard Danny's idea.
Yeah.
I haven't
had to
Kevin's
make
idea.
one, but now I will. Okay.
I'm not sure, David, honestly. Because I'm already hearing things that I really like, I'm not sure that it makes sense for me to craft a whole new thing. I'm hearing things and I'm extraordinarily full. And so I'm not sure that it makes complete, I'm not sure.
Just do the best you can. We're adults who are volunteering to be on this. You can just do what you can do, and you can only do what you can do, and you do what you want to do. And if you agree with the consensus of everybody, this is the way I look at it anyway. If you think there's certain parts where we kind of are all close to an agreement, don't even put anything down if you don't let us
I think there's pieces I'm hearing, but there's so
I'm just trying to wrap my head around putting together a special election faster than 120 days. So that's going to leave me spinning a little bit. There's no way.
Also, David, I'd like you to check with the town clerk about the biennial election issue, because I don't think we can put things on the state ballot.
No, we
I
can.
think it's,
We
I'm sorry?
can. We can. I know we can. I already asked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we put the Safe Cities was on a biennial election. The Safe Cities petition was on a biennial election.
I don't like special elections because they cost money.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, so that's why I like
I mean, that's not a reason not to do it.
but we've managed to avoid it in certain situations.
All right, so we have 6 minutes left. So what's the next date?
I'll check with the clerk. Never mind.
Yeah, check with the-
So David, can we draw a picture instead?
whatever you want.
Okay, thanks.
You already did your homework.
You don't have to do what Al did. You don't have to do what Al did and write the whole thing over.
I might draw it like a flow chart.
I'm actually going to rewrite what I had in my back pocket. I have, because I've had other ideas since that was written, but I do want to suggest some of the changes that you've already heard tonight, and I tried to make them all visible. But I will draw a picture too.
Isaac, do you know if that idea about paying to get on the ballot is that legal in Massachusetts?
I don't know, but you're right. People collect signatures and pay people. I would
All
just
the
rather
time.
the city have the money than signature
It
collectors.
violates your freedom of speech if somebody's going to make you pay to do something.
Yeah, no, that's.
I don't think it's legal.
I'm not talking about making people pay. I'm saying giving them an option.
A date in
What?
February.
Oh, date.
Oh,
A date.
what are you saying?
We need a date.
Mhm.
Do we know?
I can't do it on the second Thursday because I made a mistake, but luckily there's no zoning meeting. So it would have to, and the third Thursday probably feels tough for counselors. So how about the 24th?
No, that's a
I mean,
Friday.
the 23rd. I'm sorry.
What month are you talking about?
Yeah, what month?
February.
February.
February?
Listen, February 24th is my 24th is my birthday.
Um,
Happy
But
birthday.
it's time for me to start talking about it because I always do in January.
I can't do the 24th.
I think I could do the 23rd if that's what everybody wants. Despite it being my birthday.
8 o'clock's early for you, so you can just go out afterwards. Is February 23rd okay with everybody? I don't know about Derek, who wasn't able to attend, but
I hope he can come.
Is Ashley still on the committee?
Ashley had to resign.
now you tell us.
Okay.
I don't know if she
Um,
officially did.
Oh,
She
listen,
officially
it's
resigned.
not my place it's the mayor's place to tell us. I mean, I only know that from third hand. I don't know that.
Oh,
Mayor didn't tell us.
Take that
I'll tell
back.
you, as somebody who works in the mayor's office, Ashley had to resign.
All right, so February 23rd, thank you.
Let
Spirited
me just
discussion.
double check. Yep, I can do that.
That's Jen
What time do you
Stromson's
expect to
birthday.
start, Dave?
What's that?
What time on the 23rd?
6 p.m.
6.
That's
I
good.
say everybody comes with ideas of what they think is the method based on all the information that we have. I'm not saying you should write another ordinance, but or a charter provision, but just the important pieces. For example, Catherine, do you think there should or shouldn't be a supplemental?
Yeah.
How do you want to see things proceed?
It doesn't even have to be
I think that's
complete
really the
sentences, right?
I think the supplemental is the piece that is that we don't have agreement.
Yeah.
I don't care if we don't get. I mean, I don't think we have to send anything back to the A&O that's super specific, but I'd like conceptually to send something back.
I have a request. It would be so helpful for me if I were to see people's proposals beforehand, so I would have a chance to.
Okay. Well, the only way you're going to be
or even just to be able to see them visually.
If we get them all in, we can share them during the meeting and go over them each. We could strive to get it to the clerk before the posting deadline of 48 hours, and maybe then the clerk could send it around to everybody. But if that feels, for me, that I can't tell you what I'm going to be doing 48 hours before. So, but I'll volunteer to screen share if I can get my hands on them all.
So, Catherine, what'll happen is that on the Friday before the meeting, you'll get the agenda.
Okay.
So if you feel like you want to wait till then everybody, if people want to submit their ideas to the clerk, she'll hold them and then she'll put them in the package.
And to
David,
get
can I
them in the
make a
package,
suggestion?
to
Sure.
get them in the package before the Friday, when do I need to send
Yeah.
it to Kathy?
Before that Friday.
Can we set a date,
Yes, sir.
David, to have
Wednesday.
people?
Okay.
If we could set a date for people to submit their ideas, then we can get them all processed into the overhead so we can see them. Like whether you want it to be 48 hours before the meeting or 4 days before the meeting,
Mhm.
like February.
February 15th or 16th, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
For example, if we had the packet today, if I knew what I was doing or if Danny could help me, she could have taken the agenda and taken any of the exhibits and put them up on the screen for us to see.
Yeah, but we're waiting.
You're going to have the weekend before, you'll get, so please, we've all been given clear instructions from Kathy Scott. Let's just send the things to her, not to everybody. And she will put them in the packet and we'll get them. So if David's excited and wants to do it tomorrow, he'll send it in. If Catherine wants to wait till the to the 17th, and you'll see what other people have sent in.
So,
But it should be in before the 17th. So Al, if you want to pick a date, let's have it in before the 15th, by the 15th.
do people live with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ideas, and I'm thinking, for anybody who doesn't want to write the whole text volume, just give us bullet points.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Do not write, please do not write a whole thing.
Don't write an ordinance, Catherine.
All right. I
Putting it on my calendar.
I think, I mean, Catherine, if I could talk to you directly, I would, but I can't. So we'll just have to do it this way. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, people in the
you.
audience, for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Good night.
I'm
Thank you,
voting to
guys.
adjourn.